Independent Film Forum is coming to you from the Studio 809 Community Podcast Studio at the Next Us, a professional cooperative environment for small businesses in downtown Colorado Springs. Welcome to Independent Film Forum. I'm your host, Ralph Giordano, and I'm Festival Director for the Independent Film Society of Colorado. And today, my co-host is Jeff O'Brien, who is, now I have to read this, broadcast media instructor at Cheyenne Mountain High School. Is that correct?
For 21 years, my 21st year.
Yep. So Jeff is also one of our judges for the upcoming Colorado Short Circuit Film Festival, which is September 6th, 7th, and 8th, which leads us into speaking to our guest today, who is one of our featured filmmakers, Mr. Jordan Roman.
Hey.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
And Jordan, we're going to talk about your films and your background a little bit, but there's a special connection that you two have. What is that, Jeff?
Well, he was a student of mine for, I think, 4 years.
Yeah, that's correct.
In high school, and I think it was 2007-ish?
Yeah, 2007-8 was my freshman year, and I graduated in 2011 from Cheyenne Mountain. So.
And he created a lot of great short films even back then, and then told me he was going to college for it, and a few years later, here you are.
Here I am. I know, still pursuing film. All thanks to you, Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you.
Inspired me on the path.
So when you graduated, did you stay in town for a while, or did you already have aspirations to leave town, go to the West Coast, and attend university?
Yeah, I had a pretty good feeling by the end of my high school career that I loved making videos. I loved doing projects with friends, and it felt very communal. And so I knew that I was going to either pursue directing or acting. So as I kind of looked at a lot of different schools, I realized, okay, I definitely do think I want to spread my wings, get out of Colorado to see a different part of the country. And so I actually went all the way to the other side on the East Coast and went to North Carolina to study film. So
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I thought you just jumped ship and went straight to the West Coast. Okay, so what was that experience like?
It was great. I mean, I had some of my family on my mom's side who lives up and down the East Coast, so I had a little bit of familiarity with that part of the country. But it was great because it was just such a different feel. There's such traditions. You know, the South has its own feel that's so different from the West Coast. So I think it was great to kind of truly be on my own out there studying film those 4 years, falling more and more in love with the process of cinema, making videos, having something important to say with the actual projects that you do, and kind of how to practically make films with your own hands. So I think that, along with meeting some of my current best friends, a lot of my roommates I've had in LA were college friends, and some of my ultimate collaborators to this day are still college friends who I met when we were making projects out at Elon in North Carolina.
So did you finish up in North Carolina and then go to LA, or?
Yeah, correct. So I did 4 years at Elon. I ultimately graduated with a bachelor's in cinema. And then after that summer, that same year, I moved out to LA. So it would have been October of 2015. And I went out without a job. I just knew I had a certain amount of connections and people and older alumni, because we have a really nice alumni base in Los Angeles from former students from Elon. So I had known some of them from doing an internship program when I was still a sophomore. And I knew that having the connections was enough for me to go out there. But went out with a dream and, passions and no job and just, all the excitement in the world for just pursuing the directing dream in LA.
But at least you had some contacts, because I always tell people, definitely go East Coast, go West Coast, whatever, but don't go without a backup plan.
Yes, I totally agree.
And a couch to sleep on in case you need to.
Yes, I got lucky because a guy I had worked on some projects with over the summer. I was actually working in the summer in the East Coast still. He happened to live in LA, but he was from the area in Virginia where we were doing projects. And he allowed me to sleep in a guest room in a house that he had before my first apartment was available to move into. So yeah, I had the contacts and I had a room to sleep in. And that friend named John, he actually got me some of my first freelance gigs as a production assistant, working on set. $35 a day was like the starting rate for like an intern rate. And then that ultimately climbed up. But what was great was he also helped me get some of those first jobs once I was actually in LA.
So you have these, production assistant jobs, whatnot. What were you really looking to do? Like, what was your 5-year plan?
The ultimate dream was always writing and directing. And I think directing even more so was the ultimate passion of mine, of just being on a set, collaborating with a crew, with actors, with your cinematographer, and really being sort of the master visionary and the master communicator to all departments of what this film should look and feel like. And I think the articulation component started to become something I loved even more, because you are the person everybody's coming to ask the questions to, and being able to have those communications with so many different skilled craftspeople was such an exciting thing, because I figured these people were better at respective crafts than I was, but being able to work with them and collaborate and talk to them was such a social job that I loved. So I think that was attractive to me. So,
Jeff, do you keep in touch with your students at all after they've graduated?
Of course I do. I mean,
So tell us about some of that, because I think it's interesting that you're kind of like the launching pad in a sense for some of our filmmakers that are out there, including Jordan.
Well, what was great, when he was finishing his thesis film, he actually sent me the short film, and I got to watch it and talk to him about it. And it was a horror film, and I think he collaborated with the whole cinema class in the production. And it turned out great. And then after that, I always saw, he was doing different short films and stuff, and those were like little like side projects from where you were working, weren't they?
Very much so. They were always on the side of whatever job I was doing to make money, or full-time gigs. So very much always making that time to side hustle. Yeah, has been one of the most important things, I think, of being in LA. Still putting the dream first and foremost of directing.
Well, how did you get started in the? I mean, how do you create a production like that, though?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest barrier often is always the financing. I think the ideas and finding other like-minded people who you can collaborate with it on, and other crew members who are very passionate about other parts of the process.
That's the key word, collaboration.
Absolutely.
That's what our art form is all about.
Yeah, and so I think once you get serious enough about an idea, as a writer and director, the great part about that is I can be that first step to write the script, which is the blueprint for everything else to follow, of how it should look, how people talk, what it's going to be. And then once I get that script into a place that feels like it's ready to go into production, workshopping it with other writers, then I very much start thinking almost like a producer. And I think that's something I would tell younger filmmakers, is even if you just want to be an artist, you just want to be a director, at that early part of your career as an indie filmmaker, I think it's essential to think like a producer too, because then you can start thinking, well, how would I budget this? How much would this cost? Where would we shoot it? How can we find insurance? How can we get actors? How can we pull this off for usually a smaller budget? And that's where you start getting into problem solving mode, and I think great producers are also great filmmakers, and are people who get something done no matter what the barriers are. And then you start thinking about, okay, where's the financing come from, and are we going to self-finance it, or are we going to try to find private donors, or are we going to do a crowdsource campaign like Kickstarter? And so I think the first couple of projects were very much, I'm going to make them really small, and part of that when you're writing the script is to write it for the budget level, so then you write what you can actually realistically pull off, and you keep it simple, but you try to make something great with something simple. So even if that's one room and it's one or two actors, that's a great exercise in, can I retain an audience's attention even with what might be a mundane setup? And if you can do that, you're going to always be able to captivate people on a larger scale. But I think it's almost better to be able to do that first, then you can scale up, you know.
It's interesting. I read an interview with, I guess, Darren Aronofsky, who did The Whale.
Yeah.
And that's based upon a play. So everything takes place pretty much in one room. So in the film, it's an apartment. It's Brendan Fraser's apartment, the character in the film, or the actor who's in the film. And I remember him saying, how do I keep this cinematic when we're just in an apartment? And he said, well, I'm always going to have the camera be moving around, doing something. And so I tell some of my students the same things. I teach at the university. I said, make it cinematic. So you could have people in a room, but what makes it, cinema worthy, so that it's not a one-act play.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think one of the keys to keeping the audience retention rate is creating characters that we care about. I mean, no matter how great the cinematography or the visual effects are, I think people check out if they're not invested in the characters first and foremost. I mean, we have to want to watch the protagonist and their collective group go through this journey. And if we don't care about them, we're not going to want to watch anybody go through a journey. But if you can get your audience invested right away, then no matter what decisions are made after, we're going to want to watch it. I mean, I think a good example is some of these larger budget films that have not done so well critically. It's because there's so much visual stimuli being thrown at you. But at the end of the day, they're putting so much budget into that, but people are not actually invested in the characters. So therefore we don't care, But you have these great films that are made for $1 million or less that are riveting, and it's because then there's no visual effects, but the characters in the story are relatable and they feel like they're saying something about the world that's resonant. And I think that's the skill that I think sometimes filmmakers get too caught up in early in their career is I have to be visually spectacular. And the reality is you don't if you have a good handle on drama and dramatic structure. So I think as a filmmaker, studying that first is the best way to go, because you can learn more of the visual techniques later. You can learn visual effects later in your career. You have so many great department heads who you collaborate with who will educate you on those things when you get to that level. So, yeah. But structure a good story is harder to do.
Yep.
So since you've set the stage for structuring good stories, let's talk about some of the films that we're going to be watching at this year's festival as our featured filmmaker, one of our featured filmmakers.
Awesome.
We're showing a number of your films. Let's talk about, I think the newest one, which is called The Big Break.
Big Break, yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what's the story behind that getting made.
Yeah, so Big Break is very much sort of my ode to the stressors and I think the pressure of being an artist in the film industry and just in general in this day and age. I think there's so much pressure to perform at all times and to be on at all times even when you don't feel great. And I think one of the other themes I was speaking to with this is sometimes in the the midst of making art that's great, you can sacrifice so much of your mental health, your physical health, your relationships with people in your life just for the sake of the art. And so I think I was at that point in my life, I was feeling pretty burned out and disenchanted by LA and working in the film industry for almost a decade and seeing some of the extreme highs and lows and how much it tests your confidence and your resilience. And I think I wrote this film out of a place of, I just want to speak to this because sometimes it's so frustrating being an artist in this day and age, trying to make a living and actually being able to tell art the way that you want to, and still kind of retain your sanity. And so the film was kind of born out of this idea. And in some ways it's celebrating film, and in some ways I think I am critiquing some of the more insidious parts of the filmmaking process and how much pressure it breeds, for people working within it.
We'll talk a little bit more about that, but let's show a clip from The Big Break.
Hey, mister. Thank you, 5. Your objective here is to intimidate him.
Okay, well, I think that...
Don't think, just be. And that's the best acting advice I ever heard.
Hey there, honey bun. You got my coffee?
Hey, mister, I've never asked for much. And when I have, you haven't ever listened. You...
Cut! Take a moment. Papa Zanny, I don't care. No! Action!
Hey, mister, I've never asked for much. And when I have, you haven't ever listened.
I knew you could do it. What were you channeling?
Let's talk about casting, especially for this film.
Yeah.
What is your casting process like?
So I think a lot of times I really do look around at the actors that I already know in my circle, and I kind of look at, are there actors who I really, really like to work with, who I think genuinely deserve a shot and deserve a shot at a role that they don't usually get. I think one of the things that I'm immediately looking at is casting against type. I just think it's interesting, and I think all too often actors love to get a chance to do something that doesn't typecast them. So a good friend of mine for this lead role, who I went to college with, her name's Sarah, she had done mostly comedy. Very funny person naturally, very good at improv, but she hadn't done as much drama in her portfolio. And I started talking with her about roles she wanted to do, and then after having conversations with her about, different roles and more serious roles that were interesting to her, I just thought, well, I mostly do a lot of drama as a writer and director. So I kind of wrote this role for her for this film, knowing it would give her a chance to do something different. And I believed she could do it, And then as far as the rest of the actors within that, we did do more of a formal casting process where we had an audition, we did self-tapes, and we did a round of callbacks within that. So we probably narrowed down like 100 submissions to 10, and then we narrowed that down to like 3, and then from there I chose the other lead actress, and then some of the other crew, and some of the other roles I just rounded out with people I knew. But yeah, I oftentimes will use a friend of mine who's a casting director and get her resources, because she has an Actors Access profile, but she also has a great sense of, I think, what I look for in casting, and I think we tend to agree on the roles once I give her the breakdown for the role. So I worked with her. I brought her on and told her what we were doing, and she helped me find the other actress who's kind of like the director character who drives the main character to her breaking point. And we found this incredible actress named Heather who became a great friend from doing this film. And that's similar to how we casted Cuddle Buddies as well, where we did a virtual audition. I think at that time, that was before COVID, we did the second round of callbacks in person. But I think you're seeing more and more things going self-tape at this point in time in the industry, just for the convenience. So,
You just mentioned the film Cuddle Buddies, which is another film that we're also going to be showing at Short Circuit in September. It's kind of a controversial film. At least it's become that. But before we talk about that, why don't you just set the stage of what that film is about?
So Cuddle Buddies follows the story of a single mother named Lucy who works as a professional cuddler for her living. So she actually cuddles with clients who pay her an hourly rate to cuddle, and it's all platonic, but her clients often hire her because they are either lonely, they're not getting a lot of touch in their life, they're not getting a lot of connection. And really at the intersection of her work as a cuddler and the nature of this film, I wanted to identify why there is a stigma against platonic touch in our culture. And I think especially in America, in contrast with other cultures in the world, sometimes touch does, I think, make us very afraid and fearful, because it is a very intimate form of connecting with somebody, even just platonically. So for me, I was very interested when I learned that this was an industry, why people did it for a living, and what kinds of people were cuddlers, and what kinds of people were the clients, and why, and what that said about our culture on kind of a larger scale. So.
It's so unique. Where did
Yeah.
where did you run into this? And it's
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna make a film out of
Absolutely.
this.
This is really funny. I was actually in search of inspiration for what my next script was going to be at that time. This was 2016. I was in LA already. And I literally Googled world's weirdest jobs. I mean, because I was looking for a way to find an interesting job and that be our into a character study, knowing if there's a job that people don't know much about, not only can we, shed light on this in the film and that'll be interesting, but also we can tell whoever does this profession, we can tell their story and it becomes a character study, like a character driven piece about someone who would do this. And then we really go into all the reasons why they did it and why the clients did it. And in my brain, so many scenes started to pop up of interesting drama that could be put to screen in a narrative film about this work, if that makes sense.
You talked a little bit about that, the cultures, this would be totally acceptable. Yeah, if this was set in Europe,
Yeah.
this has been happening for a really long time.
Absolutely.
In fact, just recently, and I also sent you this message that I had seen. There's a cuddle session that was going on right here in town.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it's just a group cuddle session. People getting together. Everybody's fully clothed, and it's just, being together. And I thought, yeah, okay, so this is a real thing.
Yeah.
But you're right. And I think that I liked how you portrayed the husband in the film, Lucy's husband, because he could easily be classified as like the villain of the piece, but he really isn't. He just doesn't have an understanding. He's representing our culture. He's representing, where we are here in American culture.
Totally.
Which we're very, very much inhibited about things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good observation. That's a great point that the husband character was almost a proxy for the general public. And part of that character got developed further as I was pitching the film, and I was still trying to raise the money for the crowdsource campaign. Anytime I was on a freelance gig, inevitably people are like, hey, what do you do? What's your passion, etc. And you share which roles you really want to get to as we're all trying to rise up together. And I told him I'm a director, and I would always tell him about the project. And what was cool is every time I pitched the idea to somebody, immediately they wanted to keep talking about it. They were interested because they didn't know much about cuddling.
Just the title, Cuddle Buddies.
Yeah, and they were like, wait. And then the other thing that kind of went into that character of the husband was almost everybody I talked to was like, wait, that's not a front for prostitution, something else. And then, so that actually made its way into the script when he's using that in their custody battle case as a defense as to why she's a bad mother. And I thought that was really insidious of a thing because people just didn't understand it,
But that's also another part of our American culture that something like that would happen.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that was necessary that you put it in there. But anyway, let's take a look at a scene from Cuddle Buddies.
So Jeffrey, have you ever had a professional cuddling session before? Hey, that's okay. There's a first time for everything. Who referred you?
Yeah, she's wonderful. She's so warm.
Cuddle buddies for life.
Cuddle buddies for life.
So I'm going to invite you to just lay down beside me. Fiona, would you like to try a cuddle?
This right here, this vulnerability, that is what makes you a strong man.
Yeah, I just don't understand why he's trying to take her from me because she's ours, Linda. She's both of ours.
Introducing Mr. and Mrs. Spencer, ladies and gentlemen, right?
I love you. I'll always be here, honey.
We're the best cuddle buddies ever.
Yes, we are.
I love you, Mommy.
Cuddle buddies for life.
Cuddle buddies for life.
What's interesting is that some of our screeners, before I told them that you were one of our featured filmmakers and that film was already pre-selected, watched the film, and they all contacted me and said, I need to talk to you about this film, Cuddle Buddies. I said, yeah. I said, I know what you're going to say. I said, but he's going to be at the festival, and you can ask him directly. Did you realize that it was going to be this controversial and that it would cause this kind of a discussion?
No, honestly, it's funny because I always thought it would generate some level of discussion, because I figured as intensely curious about it as I was when I learned about it from that Google search, I figured there had to be other people out there that were going to also ask the same questions as I did, just because of human nature being curious to learn about something so different. But I didn't realize, I think, until I started screening the short, once it was already done with audiences for the first time, how many people came up after, and what was the most beautiful part about this whole process was seeing the ways it touched people in different ways, and the ways people connected with it, and the stories people told me about how either they had had a cuddler, or they felt like they were missing touch, and this film made them realize that, or they were going through a hard time, or they even had a relative who had done it because they were going through something. And I think it was really cool to see how many stories people had for me about how this work had greatly benefited them and been therapeutic, you know.
Well, that's what makes this film so perfect for a film festival.
Yep.
Because I know when we're looking at films to have presented in our festival, we want films that create a dialogue or create discussion, or
Definitely.
Or, you know, I also like films where some people say, I just really didn't like that film. And then the next person says, I love that film. I'm going, there's something there.
Definitely.
If you have that kind of a split.
Yes.
And those are the films I want in the festival, because
Yeah.
that means it's going to create, you know, an interest, and people want to know. And hopefully the filmmaker will be there so
Yeah.
they can discuss it with them.
Yeah, definitely.
But
Yeah.
you were talking just during the break.
Oh yeah. So you have a student that you graduated way back when, and I was talking to him on the phone, and he was discussing that maybe this is going to be a feature film in the future. Is that what you're shooting for? Or?
That's correct. So I realized after what we were just talking about, screening the film with so many audiences and seeing the response, I had not planned to do a feature before. I thought it was going to live and die by the short. The short was done. I'm moving on to other projects. And after the response of people continuously talking to me about it and asking me, and I had a couple people ask me, well, what's next with the story? And I didn't really have an answer for them. But as I got asked that question more, it really did dawn on me. I think there is a feature here. I think there's a market of an audience who wants to see this. And I think this would be a really great independent character drama that sheds light on this topic, and hopefully generates a discussion on a larger scale about the nature of intimacy, platonic touch, or lack thereof in our culture, and hopefully how that can release some of the judgment. I think that's where the controversial part you were speaking to.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of this culture sometimes does misunderstand things that are so different like that, or especially having to do with touch and platonic touch, especially amongst, you know, men, like platonic touch between men. I found that in my research was one of the most taboo things in American culture that I thought was interesting to kind of maybe dive into in the feature too. So yeah, I've been developing the feature film version of Cuddle Buddies. We have a script that's complete, and we're in the early development stages of just trying to attach financing and talent. And those are the two things we're currently doing right now to try to actually get it greenlit and make it official so we can go into production hopefully within the next year or two.
So I want to save some questions for the panel discussion with all of our featured filmmakers, which will be on Saturday, the 7th of September. So I'm going to end our questioning there, but I want to thank you for being here. You just happen to be in town visiting family.
That's correct. Yeah,
And
my folks are still here in the Springs, so it's been lovely to catch up with them and be back.
But you will be back for the festival.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very excited.
And then we'll be judging all the films coming up soon in the next couple of weeks. And so I want to thank you, Jordan, for being here. And, of course, my co-host, Jeff.
It was awesome. I mean, I haven't seen you in like 10 years, so this has been great. Yeah.
This was at quite
Yep.
a big reunion for everybody.
Yep.
And by the way, it was a surprise. I did not tell Jordan that Jeff was going to be here today. So
Yeah.
It was the best surprise.
I was intending on actually recording that, and I totally just forgot. So anyway, but thank you, gentlemen, for being here, and thank you all for joining us for this episode of Independent Film Forum. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Independent Film Forum. If you want to be in the know and be a good community citizen, check out Studio809podcasts.com to find many other community podcasts in the Studio 809 podcast family.